This is Husker Sports Network Originals, presented by J-Tech Construction, the official exterior experts of Husker Nation. Husker Sports Network Originals tell iconic stories from Husker history, featuring insights from the players and coaches who live them. Subscribe to the Husker Sports Network on your favorite podcast service. And now, the Cornhuskers and COVID. How Bill Moos navigated Nebraska through the pandemic.
Thanks for joining us on our latest Husker Sports Network Originals podcast. I'm Greg Sharp. 2020 was a challenging year. A pandemic brought on by the outbreak of COVID-19 disrupted people's way of life around the globe, bringing schools, businesses, and major industries, including sports, to a standstill. For months, there was no way to be certain when we would see live sports again. Nearly every league, both at the collegiate and professional level, had to figure out a path forward. Recently, I had a chance to catch up with Nebraska Athletic Director Bill Moos, who was able to give us the behind-the-scenes story of how the Huskers and the Big Ten were able to pull off a college football season in one of the most tumultuous years in modern history. Bill, I want to go back to March 11th. Last year, it was day one of the Big Ten basketball tournament in Indianapolis. I don't know if you were there. The Huskers did play that night. In fact, they were the last game of the tournament before it got shut down. Do you remember that day? Does anything stand out about March 11th to you?
Well, I remember it all very vividly. Greg, it was we were in a Big Ten ADs meeting there in Indianapolis. We had a variety of things we were on our agenda, and it was the first day of the Big Ten men's basketball tournament, and Huskers were set to play. And to tell you how quickly this moved, the meeting started, and within 15 minutes we were talking about the prospects of canceling the tournament and possibly canceling the NC2A tournament. And it picked up steam, and I think within an hour we had canceled the Big Ten tournament. Now, we went ahead and played that night, if you recall, and Coach Hoiberg had to leave the game. There was great drama and all of that, and that was on Wednesday the 11th. And then my life and many other lives changed for the future, and still to a degree today.
Not sure what this is about, but Coach Hoiberg left the arena along with Nebraska Sports Information Director Seamus McKnight. He's not been feeling good today.
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know.
I'm Scott Van Pelt here at ESPN. This astounding and unprecedented story continues to evolve.
Well, guys, I have some somewhat shocking news that I am being told right now, and that is that the Rutgers and Michigan players have been told to leave the court, and that the tournament, as of right now, and again, this is literally something I heard within the last 30 seconds, is being canceled.
We're in a different world today than we were, with all the cancellations and really the sports world shut down for we don't know how long. We know the collegiate season is over. This is it. The NCAA has wiped off all the championships for the spring sports. They have canceled March Madness. And so as far as the NCAA is concerned, with their release from a couple of hours ago, college sports is done until August. Husker football was in the midst of just getting that first week of spring practice started, and then you were going to break for spring break in about a week. And I'm sure your head was spinning initially to talk about, the basketball end of that season and the spring sports that had to get shut down. But as an athletic director at a school like Nebraska, football's always got to be toward the front of your mind. Do you recall some early conversations with Coach Frost about spring practice and having to stop those things? What do you recall about some of those conversations, maybe from back in March?
Well, you're right. We were looking at basketball, which had come to a quick halt. The spring sports had been off and running, and they were soon to be discontinued. And of course, the postseasons of all of those. But we had gotten, I think, 2 or 3 football practices in for spring ball, and we had to halt that as well. Now, all these things are very concerning, but when you're in an athletic director's chair and you see the threat of the possibility of a huge revenue stream being shut off, the attention quickly turned to that, because without it, all things are going to be affected. So, yes, Scott and I had conversations. Garrett Classy on my staff, that is the sport administrator for football, was in constant communication with Scott's people down there, and we had to figure out where we were going from there. And I might add that that's when our daily meetings started with the Big Ten, and I can get into that and would be happy to, in regards to the dilemmas that we were facing and the day-to-day changes and such, beginning then in the middle of March, with a focus on the beginning of the fall football season in September.
So the daily meetings began in March to talk about football, right?
They did, and they were 2 hours every morning, 7 o'clock Central, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on Saturday and Sunday. And there were so many things that we had to get our arms around with this pandemic, which eventually evolved into the testing piece, whether we were going to play or not, what the rest of the country was doing, what the world was doing, and what path we were going to take, and if we were even going to have a season in 2020.
What about, I know that the team scattered for spring break. The campus was shutting down. They were going to finish the semester virtually. The decision made by the chancellor to do that. When did some of the players start to come back, and how protective of the players were you in April and May to get? And I've heard crazy stories that Adrian Martinez got off the plane and they put him in a car that had been bubbleized so that they could immediately get him protected. How much of that was going on in April and May?
Well, we felt all along that the safest place for our student athletes during all of this was in Lincoln. And the safest place in Lincoln was in our facilities. So we wanted to make sure that we had our young people in the high-risk areas of Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, into Florida, Orlando, and around there, and New Jersey, Chicago, and like that, get them back here and in a safer environment. And then once they were here, our aim was to make sure that they were working out in a controlled area where we could make sure things were clean, that we could be testing, that we could be taking temperatures, wearing masks, cleaning, and all of that. So those were the things we were focusing on. Our football guys, some did not even leave. Many did, and when they came back, they were eager to get going, to get working out. I was pushing within the Big Ten to allow workouts, unofficial workouts in our facilities, where we could make sure the environment was clean, and finally got that pushed through so that we could start And if I recall, that was June 1st.
How quickly into this thing in the spring, Bill, did you get UNMC involved in your plan?
Well, we accessed them very early on in the process. We're very fortunate to have a great medical center in Omaha that's part of our system. Dr. Gold, who's the chancellor of that campus, was extremely helpful. Chris Cradavell had already been asked to be one of the key people within the conference as we explored options. And then Dr. Capsule, a virologist, was right there with us. And so as we started doing our own testing here on campus, and those were in the early days of testing, we were so very fortunate to have UNMC very, very much involved, and they continue to be. It really was a big piece of our ability at the end of the day to have the lowest percentage of positive results in tests throughout the Big Ten.
I want to move to the summer now, Bill, to July. Right after the 4th of July, Kevin Warren surprised a lot of people around the country when he came out with the announcement that the Big Ten was not going to play non-conference games. Were you surprised by that, or was everybody in the loop on that before that got out? Because I know a lot of national people, a lot of the other conferences were caught off guard by that announcement. I believe it was the second week of July.
Well, again, we were talking every morning for 2 hours. We were trying. There's a variety of different opinions, and when you have, Greg, a footprint as large as ours, 14 institutions in 11 states, going from Nebraska all the way to the East Coast. You have a variety of different environments. And, of course, I felt all along, as did the people here at Nebraska, that we were the safest, if not the safest, one of a couple in our footprint for training and bringing our kids back and preparing them for a season. Now, during these discussions, we decided that the group did that we were going to go with a conference-only schedule. And in early on, we were going to push everything back to January. Then we thought, hey, let's look at this. Let's have a conference-only schedule, protect the footprint, not play non-conference teams that were not complying with the same rules and regulations that we had established. And that's when we put together the 10-game schedule that came out and was approved by the presidents and chancellors and was released. And I believe that was in early August.
Yep.
It lasted 6 days, and the plug was pulled, and we were back looking at the possibility of not even having a football season in 2020, and the possibility of having one in beginning in after the first of the year. So January, February, even as late as March or April.
Husker Sports Network Originals are presented by J-Tech Construction, the official exterior experts of Husker Nation. Find out more about this great Husker partner at jtechconst.com. Now back to the Cornhuskers and COVID, how Bill Moos navigated Nebraska through the pandemic.
How involved were you in the August the 5th announcement of the 10-game schedule? How involved were you in that? I know they divvied up some of the duties of competition committee, scheduling committee. How involved were you in that?
Well, we were all very much involved, and there was a ton of input. I ultimately was on the scheduling committee, but as it turned out, after that 10-game schedule was scrapped, we basically had 3 committees when we were starting to look at maybe a more condensed schedule that would begin later in the year. And that was the one which we ultimately ended up playing. But the big committee on that, well, they were all big, but the biggest one was the medical. We had to convince the presidents and chancellors that our student athletes could be in a safe place, that we were controlling our venues, that the testing was such that when we did take the field, it was a clean field, and that in the end did work. The other 2 committees were television. You've got to understand, losing that television revenue just for the University of Nebraska, along with no fans in the stands, was going to be about $100 million revenue hit. And so we were trying to salvage as much of that television money as we could, and even with a condensed season. So that was the second committee. And then the third one, of which I was a part, was the scheduling committee. Now, that did not mean what was our schedule going to look like. It really turned out to be more in terms of what the postseason would look like. Where were we going to play these games? Were we going to be in NFL dome stadiums? All these different options on the table that all had to be addressed.
August the 5th was when the 10-game schedule came out. The 11th is when the plug gets pulled. And there were rumblings, Bill, over that weekend, the 7th and 8th. We started hearing this isn't going to happen. I don't think this is going to happen. What? Take me back to that time. It had to be a crazy couple of days because the teams are now practicing, thinking they're going to play in early September, and yet there's rumblings that this thing's not going to happen. How crazy was that to live through that week?
It was crazy, I got to tell you. And again, now we've had our football team basically here voluntary workouts on June 1st. They were back here well before that and working out amongst themselves. And so think of the time frame here. And we had started a fall camp, getting ready for the schedule that had been approved. And then, boom, we don't have a season.
We certainly want to play football. I think that's our priority. Our priority is to our kids, making sure they're safe and allowing them to do what they want to do. We want to play a Big Ten schedule. I hope that's what happens. Our university is committed to playing no matter what that looks like and how that looks. We want to play no matter who it is or where it is. So we'll see how those chips fall. We certainly hope it's in the Big Ten. If it isn't, I think we're prepared to look for other options.
And that is when I took the reins of with the endorsement of Chancellor Green and President Carter, and hand in hand with Scott Frost, that we're going to start pursuing a schedule of non-conference games. If it's not an issue of protecting the footprint because we're not going to have a season, we wanted to go play anybody that would play us because Nebraska needs football, and I feel that football needs Nebraska. And so I started to go down that road and was immediately cut off by the conference, which we had some tense moments there for quite some time, and really started to lobby and try to get this medical committee working and getting some things that could be approved so that we could salvage something out of the year. Now, I think it's important to point out that the two lead people in this effort was myself and Gene Smith at Ohio State. My motive was, again, as I mentioned a minute or two ago, was to get football back for Nebraska, for the state of Nebraska. We, as a state, are dependent on football for our morale, for tons of revenue, for the well-being of the state. Ohio State, their motivation was a little bit different. They have national championship caliber team. They felt that they got slighted, not really slighted, but got gypped out of a potential chance to play for it a year ago when they had that controversial loss to Clemson in the semifinals. And they wanted to get back on that field and have a chance to hopefully win the Big Ten championship and be considered to get back into the national playoffs, which in the end they did. So Gene and I really led the charge on that in trying to win over our peers and those in the conference office, primarily the commissioner, Kevin Warren, so that we had a chance. And in the end, we had another schedule that was approved. I did not vote. I was the only dissenting vote on that, as I felt that we were really taking it in a hard way when you really looked at our schedule, where we had a number. We had, I think it was 3 top 10 programs in our first 4 weeks. So we felt did not have to be that unfavorable to Nebraska, but in the end, it was what it was, and we tightened our chin strap and came out and played.
Bill, when you were exploring those other options in August, there was a great deal of pushback from a lot of people around the country, a lot of national media towards Scott, you, the school. Why do you think that was?
Nebraska is a total embarrassment these days, Greeny. I don't even know where to begin other than to say they've been in the Big Ten for 10 years, and the only major championship they've won is the league's biggest crybaby. And the athletic director, in trying to defend playing Chattanooga, said, well, it could be an important data point for the CFP. Nebraska and the CFP, I've got a better chance of winning the country's most sexiest man than Nebraska has of going to the CFP this year.
Yeah, I'm going to use the word applaud the presidents, and for not listening to the likes of the people at Nebraska, a school that comes in and is doing the biggest whining. You know what? The Big Ten has operated for 116 years, most of them damn successful, without Nebraska, which has been around for the last 9.
I think that at this point, Greeny, I would demand an apology from the chancellor and the president and Scott Frost, and not one behind closed doors, a public apology. Or if I'm Kevin Warren right now, I'm working on the way to get their ass out of the Big Ten.
Well, here you had the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 just moving forward with somewhat of a normal football season when you talk about the number of games to be played. We went a different direction, and as I mentioned, pulled the plug on a schedule. The Pac-12 decided to follow suit. And so really, there were only 3 of the 5 Power 5 conferences, plus and Notre Dame playing in the ACC for this past year, that were set to play. When we got back and our presidents and chancellors agreed to the schedule that started, I believe it was the 21st of October, the Pac-12 jumped back in too. And so then we had all 5 conferences back playing, even though the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were with reduced competitions. But there were some feelings that we weren't being team players in regards to the bigger picture of college football. We were tremendously concerned with the health and well-being of our student athletes, which every conference is, and that we felt that protecting our footprint and having a reduced schedule would play in our favor. The problem with that I call it the third schedule after the original and then the 10-game schedule, and what we ended up with was we did not have any windows to play canceled games. And so the other conferences had that luxury. So when we had a game that was canceled, that was it. There wasn't a chance to come back and play it at another time. And I think, Greg, at the end of the day, I think we had 10, maybe 11 games that were canceled in the Big Ten.
August 11th, the announcement to postpone the season. September 16th is the announcement to resume the season. What were some of the factors in your eyes that got the reversal of the decision?
Well, there's no question, as I alluded to, it was the medical piece. The testing protocol, who was going to do it, who's going to provide it, how can we make sure it's consistent from one campus to another, the travel, the testing on the road, the antigen testing, which became the really the backbone of what we were doing to enable us to even have a season. I think that Dr. Jim Borchers of Ohio State was an all-star. If anybody deserves a game ball for 2020, it's him. He led, in my opinion, was the front runner of that medical committee, and did a fantastic job of convincing the presidents and chancellors that we could have clean fields, a safe environment, good travel protocol, and be able to carry on a season with, again, the health and well-being and welfare of our student athletes uppermost. And to, I really think, our credit, we pulled that off, even with the number of cancellations that we had to have. Those were all a part of the predetermined protocol and procedures and policies that we followed throughout the season.
What impact, if any, Bill, did the parent protests, the lawsuit that some Nebraska parents put on the Big Ten, what impact, if any, did that have on the league?
Well, again, this was a group of passionate parents, again, feeling that Nebraska deserved to have a season. If we weren't going to be involved in Big Ten play, let us go play somebody else. And that really, I think, was the nucleus of the lawsuit, which, of course, caught the attention of the Big Ten and the country. I embraced that. It was not initiated by the university. It was completely separate. But again, being the parent of a major college football player, I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to those parents and the young people. In the end, it was dropped. Those young guys got to play. The parents got to watch them play. It was not normal, but it was better than nothing.
When you were scheduled to play, you were able to play. Other schools had issues throughout the fall, and how did you do it? How did you make sure that the Nebraska football team was able to field a team week in and week out, where some schools weren't able to get that done?
Well, again, we start with a safe environment. Lincoln, Nebraska, our campus, and the University of Nebraska athletic facilities. I tip my hat to my staff. We spent countless hours establishing our own protocol. A big piece of it was we bubbled the football team. We excluded everyone else from Memorial Stadium and basically North Stadium, West Stadium, and East Stadium. We utilize the great talent we have within our building, our medical people, the performance lab. Chris Bach did a fabulous job for us there. And we had strict procedures of entry and exit, one only entrance into the entire facility here in North Stadium, West Stadium, East Stadium, temperatures taken, contact tracing, daily testing as we got into the season, 6 times a week. Those of us that were traveling with the team, the same. We were just extra cautious. Training table for football only. As we evolved into the 2 basketballs, and now that football season's over, we've got most everybody back at training table, but not in the training table as a room, as an area. Only football was in there. And because of that, the dashboard that we'd follow daily in the Big Ten, Nebraska was by far the lowest in regards to having positive tests. So again, we did it. We did it right. We did it the best. No, we're not in the middle of a metropolitan area. I think that did help. We made sure that we emphasized with our players that they have to have the discipline to not go out at night and socialize. That's where they're going to catch it. We were not going to class. All of our classes were taking remotely. And so that surely helped. So the only way that we were going to contact the virus was by going home for a holiday or any other reason, or socializing around town. And to their credit, they adhered to our strict rules, and it worked. We had very few positive tests. We had very few, if any, players miss a game. And I really am very, very proud of both my staff, our coaches, and of course the student athletes.
Bill, you and the rest of the athletic directors, you laid a bunch of ground rules. You had the orange, red system set up. You even had a rule in there that you had to get 6 games in to be eligible for the conference championship game. Well, that didn't happen for Ohio State. They only got 5 regular season games in. Take me through the process to change that to allow them to compete, and were you in favor of that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Greg, we talked about the motivation, and for me, it was to allow our players to have that experience of playing a season, and I was hopeful that we would have a chance to have some of our fans be able to enjoy the season as well. That didn't turn out, but Ohio State in our conference. Really, with the return of their players, their team, the momentum they had built the previous year, was in a position to be considered for the college football playoff. We had said you had to play 6 games to be eligible for the conference championship. And they ended up having to have a couple, 2 or 3 games. Actually, I think it was 3 canceled, 1 on their part, and I think 2 on their opponents. I may not be fully accurate there, but it dropped them down to 5. They were undefeated. They had followed the protocols. They were ranked. They were in the top 4 of the college football playoffs. And we felt, hey, they followed the protocols just like all of us. They deserve a chance to represent the Eastern Division. Indiana had a fairy tale season, very well coached, great players, but Ohio State did beat them. And so I really got to hand it to our athletic directors in the conference as we voted to approve amending the 6-game mandatory number to go ahead and allow Ohio State to represent the East with only 5. And then, of course, they won the Big Ten championship over Northwestern and went on to beat Clemson handily in the semifinals and then lose in the national championship.
Well, Bill, it's been quite a ride, a 10-month ride to get Big Ten football, get Husker football played in the fall. I'm sure you're anxious for things to return to some form of normalcy here in 2021.
Well, Greg, yes, and we're talking about football and these young people and their lives, but there's been so many lives affected by this pandemic that are bigger than football, across our country and across the world. And you just need to look at our country and the state of affairs, businesses being shut down, and people losing jobs, the number of deaths that have occurred, which are just painstakingly amazing and so sorrowful. And so with the vaccine and some of the things we've learned and some of the many things we've done as a culture, I'm hoping that our country will come together like our football team here at Nebraska and our department. And I think it's important to point out that I told our entire staff, all of them, and our student athletes that at the end of the day, when the dust settles and this crisis is over, we will be judged and I think really evaluated on how we navigated through this crisis, far more than any championships we will ever win. And our people locked arms. We went through 51 furloughs across the board, salary reductions and budget cuts. We eliminated 17 FTE, those people all losing their positions. But we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I brought all those furloughed people back. We lifted the salary reductions. We're working on ways to ease the strain of the budget for FY21, and our sights are on the future, Greg, and what we're looking forward to down the road, and hopefully that's a good, safe environment. Our venues full of our great Husker fans and our young people competing for championships and living their dreams.
Bill, I can't thank you enough for reliving what I'm sure has been the hardest year of your career, and not an easy one to do, but you made it. And so congratulations on that, and I certainly appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure, Greg, and looking forward to some better days ahead, and wishing you all the best.
The proceeding has been a Husker Sports Network original. The Cornhuskers and COVID, How Bill Moos Navigated Nebraska Through the Pandemic, was edited by Josh Hilkeman. Executive producers were Greg Sharp, Ben McLaughlin, Tim Curran, and Austin Orman. Sound design by Brett Whitty. Subscribe to Husker Sports Network podcast for more great Husker Sports original episodes presented by J-Tech Construction.